Hello, everyone. My name is Professor Mariana Pantic. Welcome to MCA 115 News Reporting. Today's lecture is about writing for broadcast media. So, as you already know, broadcast media represent television and radio. Some of you might decide to build a career in this area, and I thought it would be important just to introduce the lecture where I will discuss a little bit how broadcast writing is different from print and online news writing. So, what is broadcast journalism? As I mentioned, broadcast journalism refers to television and radio. These two types of media are very influential because they have many listeners and viewers. And I'm not sure if you know this, but you are used to getting your news on social media or on other online platforms. But television remains a very popular media in the United States for consuming news, for news consumption. So, aside from online media, a lot of people turn to television to obtain their daily dose of news, but also they turn to radio as well, especially those people who commute to work. So, on their long commute, they tend to tune into local radio stations and listen to the news that way. They represent traditional media. What other media are in this group of traditional or legacy media? That is another term that we also use to describe them. So, aside from broadcast media or radio and television, it is also print media, newspapers, and magazines. Broadcast journalists are writing to be heard and seen rather than to be read. Sound is their primary consideration. Sound is primary consideration for both television and radio, but when it comes to television, then the videos they produce are as important as the sound. Let's take a look at radio and TV reporters and what they do. How do they need to write? So, even though sound and what you see and what you hear is the most important thing when it comes to broadcast media, especially television, what you see. Like in case of radio, is just what you hear, but it is important to write well and spell everything correctly because you want to, when you're a reporter working for television or for a radio station, you want to make sure that the copy you write is easy for announcers to read and for listeners to understand. So that means your sentences need to be even more simple, more concise, so people who listen to your news story are able to understand everything well. Radio and TV reporters identify a newsworthy angle for their story, and then they thoroughly research and report the issues and events to tell the story accurately. Radio journalists create stories in a listener's mind using only sound. So, this is their primary focus. TV journalists create stories by adding video. So, when we look at radio and TV journalism, radio and TV journalists, there are a lot of similarities between them, especially because even people who watch television, when they turn the TV on, maybe they're not watching it right away, but they're just walking around listening what's going on. This is what I do all the time. And then when I hear that something important, when I hear like something that the story is very important to me, that something is happening, then I rush to my TV and then I watch the news. So I also tend to listen to the news on television more than to really watch them. One more format, but I'm not going to go into more detail because you will talk about it in your audio journalism class. But one more format that is becoming more and more popular is um, it's basically it has grown from radio journalism and it is podcast journalism. It's becoming very popular. I like to listen to podcasts both when I go for a run on, and then I would listen to them on Spotify, but I also like watching and listening to them when I jog on a treadmill. And I'm sure that a lot of people are opting for this format because it's very convenient for them to consume news stories or analysis of relevant events this way. Broadcast versus print journalism. So I wanted just to compare, as I touched upon writing for broadcast and print, and I just wanted to compare these two copies so you can see the difference and how a print news copy looks like in comparison to a broadcast news copy. And these are examples that cover the same event. So let's take a look at it. Police are looking for a Nashville woman this afternoon. So it's very like straight to the point, but very simple, and they're not identifying her right away. When it comes to the lead in print newspapers, they are in newspapers, they are print, of course. When it comes to a print news copy, it's basically a little bit longer and there's more information in the lead. So instead of police are looking for a Nashville woman this afternoon, there is a lead that says a Nashville woman escaped yesterday from the Jackson County courthouse after being convicted of assault and battery charges from last May. So you can also see the difference because in a print news copy, they're focusing on their news story. In the news story, they're reporting on something that, according to them, happened yesterday. It did happen yesterday because when they're printing the paper for tomorrow. So everything in newspaper is going to be yesterday. As when you get a copy of a newspaper, it's about events that happened the day before. But when it comes to broadcast media, when it comes to radio and television, they really need to, they're reporting on the news that happened today, on the events and issues that happened today. So that's why you're not going to see, oh, police are looking right now for a Nashville woman. It's not necessarily like police are looking. So we're just informing you about what happened. And then in the second paragraph, they provided more details. So Lucretia Morris fled the Jackson County courthouse moments after being convicted of assault and battery. And you see, if you again like compare these sentences, you will see how in case of of the print news copy, sentences are a bit longer, and also print news copies use quotations. In case of broadcast journalism, they do use direct quotations, but it's usually like a soundbite that they utilize in their report, like a soundbite from a person they interviewed or something like that. So instead, they simply used an indirect quotation in this story. Assistant prosecutor Reggie Maxim says Lucretia Morris hit a guard and ran to freedom at 3 o'clock. The 28-year-old woman is thought to be wearing jeans and a white short sleeve shirt and red tennis shoes. Sheriff Bobby McNeil says Morris is armed and dangerous. So every sentence is very simple, very straight to the point, very brief and clear. So when you read it, you even like, if you don't look at the copy and if I tell it to you instead, you will be able to follow what I say. Police are looking for a Nashville woman this afternoon. So it's really easy. It's really straight to the point. It's very simply written. So if we compare the two, there are some other conclusions that we could draw from that. The lead focuses on one fact in case of broadcast news copy. In case of print news copy, the lead is the summary of 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why. The next sentence answers why. In case of the broadcast copy, like why are the police looking for a Nashville woman? Well, and then the second paragraph explains that they're looking for her because she fled the Jackson County courthouse moments after being convicted of assault and battery. So in case of the print copy, the bridge answers how from an authority. So Lucretia Morris hit the guard after her trial ended at 3 p.m. and ran out of the courthouse, according to Reggie Maxim, a county assistant prosecutor. So you see the difference, like there's more information, and then in the second paragraph there is, in the case of this print copy, the second paragraph answers the question how. Now, verbs are in the present tense in broadcast media, but in print, because the story will be printed tomorrow, then we need to use the past tense because we're going to talk tomorrow about something that happened the day before. Attribution begins sentences. This is also a very important difference. So if you watch the news, you will hear President Donald Trump said this. In case of a bring coffee, it will be, we're gonna introduce some new measures regarding immigration, President Donald Trump said. So its attribution will be at the end of the statement. Listeners cannot hear quotation marks. That's the problem with broadcast. So that's why you will rather, if there are no sound bites in that report, you are rather going to hear an indirect quotation. In case of print media, direct quotes signal authority in case of this example that I just showed you. When it comes to leads, like news leads in broadcast media, leads need to capture the attention of listeners immediately. Oh, police are looking for a national woman. So it's kind of, what happened? Why are they looking for her? A good lead will convince people to listen even to the stories they do not feel initially affected by. I wouldn't care. But if I heard something like that, like, I live in New York, why would I care about the police looking for a national woman? But then I'm thinking, oh, what happened? I want to hear it. Because they put it in a way that would attract me to pay more attention to the story. Broadcast journalists rewrite leads throughout the day to update audiences waiting to hear the latest news about an ongoing story. So maybe later that day, if they arrested her, you would hear probably the police have arrested the woman they've been looking for, and so on. So you will hear like a different lead because to broadcast media, just like to online media, the latest information about an event that is the most relevant information is how you will start your story. So let's say when they were looking for her during the day, that would be the lead of the story. So the lead of the story would be that they were looking for her. But if we have a major update that they arrested her, then maybe at 6, 7 o'clock in a newscast on at 6 or 7 o'clock, the story will start exactly with that they arrested the woman they were looking for. Now, what are some common broadcast leads? There are a few different types. There's the hard lead, and this is what you will frequently hear when it comes to gun violence, terrorist attacks, accidents, and so on. This is one of the examples. A Russian missile strike on a mall in Ukraine this afternoon killed at least 18 people and wounded many more. So we'll look at this information. You'll see that they started straight to the point with the number of killed, just like we do in print media, just with less details. And then in the second paragraph, you will learn more about how why this airstrike, missile strike happened. Then we have soft leads. Soft leads are different because they usually it tells a broadcast audience that something important is coming up and invites them to continue listening to hear the story. So they're a little bit more casual, but they're written in a way that hook you into listening or watching the news. So an example from the textbook is drivers may be getting a bit of a break from the eye-popping gas prices that have been hitting their wallets hard lately. By the way, don't look forward to this because the news story is from 2022. So drivers may be getting a bit of a break from the eye-popping gas prices that have been hitting their wallets hard lately. So you see, like it's a more casual tone, but then in the second paragraph, they explain why gas prices might be going um, down. The Biden administration is considering suspending the federal gas tax to give motorists some relief from record-setting gas prices. So the second paragraph actually explains the lead of the story, and then there are other leads that we can see in broadcast media. Actually, here the throwaway lead, which intrigues listeners. After they have focused their attention on the story, the next sentence begins the real lead. So in this case, the first sentence is, it's 95 degrees outside. Do we really want to think about a warm winter coat? Retailers are previewing fall and winter clothing lineups several weeks earlier than last year. So this is the key sentence. So this is basically an explanation of they started a story in a casual way. You wouldn't do something like this with a breaking news story, with a hard news story. You need to go straight to the point. If like a terrorist attack happened, you need to say it right away. But in this case, when it comes to more casual events that fall into the domain of entertaining or soft news, you can use more casual leads. So the throwaway lead in this case is actually means that the lead is in the second paragraph, as you can see, because in the second paragraph, from the second paragraph, you can actually learn what is really going on. So it's 95 degrees outside. Do we really want to think about a warm winter coat? And then retailers are previewing fall and winter clothing lineups several weeks earlier than last year. Men's fall and winter fashions are being featured in several shows in the metropolitan area during July. Retailers say they are hoping consumers will start shopping for their fall wardrobes before inflation pushes price higher, and so on. Now, one more type of lead that is seen in broadcast media is the umbrella lead. The umbrella lead basically summarizes or ties together two or more loosely related news stories before delving into each separately. So it can be, let's say, you can deal with 4 stories or 5 stories. It can be two or more loosely related stories. So you can deal with 5 stories. Let's say there is a tornado that affected multiple states. Not multiple states. There's a storm that affected multiple states, for example, and then you're collecting information. You're collecting information from different states. So you want to see if infrastructure is affected in any way. You want to see if anyone is injured or killed in the storm, if there are any traffic accidents, and so on. So you're basically collecting information from multiple states. And instead of starting your story with one state and explaining what happened there, you can group them together and have like a general lead where you would describe the entire situation in that region that is affected by the storm. And then you will go into more details about each of them. So it's kind of, in this case, it's actually is an example that looks into an accident. So, and this is common for television and radio again, if they're covering, multiple areas, and then there are reports from those areas about multiple incidents, or if they want to just create one story that is covering all the traffic accidents that happened that weekend in the area. So they group them together and then they discuss each of those traffic accidents separately in the report, but they have this general umbrella lead that covers all of them, and then they go into detail. And you see this example from the textbook. The bitter cold snap outside is thought to be the cause of 2 separate deaths in the city this morning. So 2 people died because of the cold. And you see the point of this lead. So instead of starting with, An 82-year-old woman died because of the whole cold and so on. But there is another man who also died. So you want to group them together into one lead and then discuss them separately. So the bitter cold snap outside is thought to be the cause of two separate deaths in the city this morning. Police say an 82-year-old woman who apparently fell on the ice outside of her home in Bunker Hill Township died of hypothermia this morning. Alva St. Clair slipped on her sidewalk sometime during the night, broke her hip, and froze as temperatures dipped into single digits. About 3 hours later, and a few miles away, neighbors found Joshua Johnson frozen to death in his truck in his driveway. So you see this two tragic events that happened were portrayed in one news story. We had one lead that grouped them together, and then they decided to organize this story in a chronological order. This is what happened first with this lady who unfortunately fell and died. And this is what happened with the man who was just a few miles away from her 3 hours later. So basically, these are common types of leads that you will find in broadcast news stories. So broadcast stories are basically short because listeners and viewers cannot digest as much as information as print readers can. Why? Because when you read something in newspapers, you can go back to that paragraph and reread it to understand. But then when it comes to broadcast media, you basically just listen to it and you can't rewind. You just continue listening to the story. So you need to pay attention. But even if you don't pay that much attention, everything needs to be simplified because complicated, complex things in broadcast media can confuse viewers and listeners. Stories are being updated throughout the day as many radio and TV stations have several newscasts. So you're not going to see the same thing, or you will see the same thing, but with new updates in the evening that you saw in the morning. Broadcast journalists get news from news services such as Associated Press or Reuters or AFP, other news outlets, people, as well as news releases. Those releases could come from, let's say, PR agencies, political parties, the White House, non-governmental organizations, companies, and so on. When it comes to interviewing for broadcast media, I must emphasize that it differs in comparison to interviewing for print. One of the things that broadcast journalists need to do, they need to pay attention to their movements. They need to minimize them for sound quality. So, because in case of print media, you might just take notes when you're interviewing someone, or you can just record them, and then you will transcribe those interviews. And in case of broadcast media, they're actually going to use videos, or in case of television, or sound bites, audio sound bites. In case of radio, to create their news reports. So you need to make sure that you're not moving much, as it could affect sound quality. So the microphone you're wearing is not supposed to pick up any distracting or unnecessary words. Of course, noise. Of course, we can clean that today in iMovie or any other software that you use for video editing, but still, like, these things are good to keep in mind. They also in broadcast journalists, they also respond non-verbally to their subjects during the interview so that their voices will not be recorded. And they're, no, like, you don't need to edit that much afterwards. Journalists select sound bites that convey the heart of the story, and most sound bites are about 6 to 20 seconds, the 21 seconds long. I also wanted to introduce you to a couple of terms in audio journalism that you're going to hear in case so you don't get surprised, in case you decide to pursue a career in radio journalism. One of them is a sequence. What is a sequence? So let's say you go to an event, such as a press conference, and then you decide to um, use several you want to use sound bites from several people who deliver their speeches at the press conference. So how are you going to do that? It's basically you're going to use this sequence, and the sequence is actually the order in which those sounds are present. So this order is important, especially when people are speaking. Let's say you went to Donald Trump's convention before 2024 presidential elections, and then he spoke at the convention, and then Elon Musk spoke at the convention. So when you think about your report, how you're going to organize it, of course, your sequence is going to be organized in a way that you will add that quotation from Donald Trump first, and after that from other people who supported him at the convention, who also deliver speeches at the convention. So that is the sequence. Tone, if people are sad, happy, impressed, the audio should really capture it. We talked about this also when we talked about interviewing. Like if you're interviewing fans at sports events, of course, you want to make sure that aside of what they have to say, you also you have also recorded some noise in the background, so because you want to portray the atmosphere, um, and you want your listeners to hear that, to feel that atmosphere, because that is how you're immersing them into your story. So make sure that emotions are conveyed accurately. Ambience is the context in radio reporting, so it reports the conditions under which people talk. So an ambience could be exactly that, or like a press conference, or it can be your interview's office, for instance. A couple of tips for you. Keep in mind that you write for the ear when it comes to audio journalism. So I'm talking about radio and podcasts. Use simple words and avoid pronouns, sounds. Your sound needs to be conversational because people will be reading it aloud. Grammar needs to be correct, and time element is usually unnecessary because we really assume that it happened today. However, it can be important sometimes. So sometimes we need to say that something happened today. Sometimes we need to emphasize the time element. The terrorist attack happened this morning, or let's say I'll give you an example. Like when I woke up on January 1st this year and I turned the TV on, unfortunately, and it's really sad to wake up on that first day of the year and to hear about the death of more than 10 people in New Orleans or anywhere else in the world. It is just very sad to hear that. And then when I woke up, like the first thing after I heard about the number of victims, the next thing was, okay, I was aware that it happened for the New Year's, but I was really curious at what time. So in some cases, and this is actually an example that portrays how important it is to state at what time something happens. So they're going to say, um, I believe it was 3 a.m. So it was January 1st at 3 a.m. So it was after the New Year's Eve, like past the New Year's Eve. And it was when people were still celebrating the New Year's. The tragedy, the terrorist attack happened. So I was curious in some cases, or you want to say, when I hear stories, like here and there, we hear stories about um, crime on the New York City subway. And every time I hear that, I really want to know the time because I have friends who commute. I commute as well. Aside from like knowing where something happened, I also want to know at what time it happened. Like, was it in the morning during rush hour or in the afternoon? And like those details can be really important, but you also, in some cases, you don't need to necessarily mention it because it's clear. Like if any of the top politicians are being interviewed or delivering a, a press conference, and then of course, it happened today. I mean, they are in the media almost every day. So when we see them, we know that they had something new to say today. That's why broadcast media are reporting on it. A couple of other suggestions, a couple of other tips with respect to writing for broadcast. Titles usually come before names. So an example is former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Avoid abbreviations, even on second reference. Only the most commonly known abbreviations should be used, such as FBI, UN, CNN. Avoid direct quotations if possible. Numbers and statistics should be rounded off. So instead of saying 4.103 million, you can just say more than $4 million. Personalize the news when possible and appropriate. For example, gas is going to cost you 5 cents more a gallon. So this is sufficient to say in the first sentence, and then you would explain exactly how much it will cost, when this starts, and so on. A couple of terms that are frequently used that are actually common to broadcast media that you should have in mind. I wanted to add them on 2 slides, so to familiarize you with them. Their voicer. Voicer means that a story contains only the reporter's voice. A soundbite is part of an interview that you have recorded. Most of them are 6 to 21 seconds long. So you interview a person and you just find that most important quotation that you want to use for your broadcast story, for your radio story, and then you select that part of the interview. That quote is called a soundbite. Mini documentary is a story that runs more than a minute. Some of them last up to 15 minutes. Voiceover is when the story is for video and simply goes along with the video that is being shown. Wraparound is when a news anchor briefly introduces a story and then a reporter gives the story and includes a soundbite. Other terminology, and this is especially for television. Videographer is a person who is holding a camera. Framing is what is in that picture. Headroom, and you know that already, is the space in a headshot between the top of the head and the top of the picture. Usually there should be some space for headroom. Tripod is a camera holder. You know this as well. A rule of thirds is something that we also learned when we were talking about photography. We'll talk about it again. It is an imaginary set of horizontal lines that divide what you see through the camera into 3 equal parts, and an imaginary set of vital lines that do the same thing. So the picture is divided in 9 parts, and your subject is going to be along those lines. Let's take a look at the most important aspects of this lecture. Television and radio represent broadcast media. The key focus of television and radio is writing to be heard or seen. And you need to write a lead that is simple, that is good, that is going to convince people to listen or watch your story. There are different types of leads that are present in broadcast media. They include hard leads, soft leads, throwaway leads, and umbrella leads. And go back to broadcast terminology and learn what it means to use a soundbite, voiceover, wraparound, a tripod, and so on. Thank you very much for listening. Have a nice day, and I will see you soon. And also, the exercise for you is posted in the discussion. Bye bye.